All right, so I discovered a new band the other day. Band is called Beholder. And they have a new album coming out, In the Temple of the Tyrant. Comes out April 25th of 2025. Really excited for this, actually. You know, when I talk about new bands, discovering a new band, it's much more of a rarity these days than it was, say, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was discovering all sorts of really new bands coming out that were actually very, very good. You know, you might get 10 CDs, because back then they sent CDs out. And you might like one of them, maybe two of them. And you're like, dude, I just discovered 2 new bands this week. It was like a weekly thing back then. And actually, the show was predicated on finding bands like that. Well, these days, it's a little bit different. You get 100 new albums sent to you, and you still might like only one of them. So it's actually less common for me to find a brand new band that I really like and that I'm really into. Folks, I found one. This band is called Beholder. The band is a mix of American power metal and doom. Has a lot of elements of both. They described themselves like that in the press release. It was a very well-written press release, by the way. And it's very, very accurate. It's been a long time since I've discovered a brand new band with a debut album coming out that I actually liked. And it's also been a long time since I found that band in America. But this is a great record. This comes out on, hold on, let me look at the record label, Black Lion Records. It's coming out vinyl, CD, probably going to be on all the streaming stuff. But it's very, very good. And, you know, the songwriting on it, you know, when I start listening to a brand new band that I've never heard before, and it's their first album, most of them do not have debut albums that sound as good as this does. Now, granted, you have guys that are in this project that have been in other bands. The singer John Yelland, which I'll get into here in a second, he's in a power metal band from the USA called Judicator, which sounds more like Euro metal than it does power metal from the States. And you have Carlos Alvarez. He was in a band he was in Power Theory, and also plays in a band called Shadow Dance. Overall, this album's great. And it truly sounds like that. It sounds like doom and American power metal. Now, what I will say is this. I think John Yelland fits this band like a glove. Now, as many of you know, I'm not as big of a fan of European power metal, at least newer bands that sound like that, as I would have been 20 years ago. Judicator's not a bad band at all. They do that subgenre very, very well. They do justice to it. The albums are pretty solid. But that dude singing this kind of heavy metal is great. He sings the power metal stuff a lot differently than this. And truthfully, that guy is actually a pretty versatile vocalist. Like, I could see him singing almost any kind of heavy metal. I could see him singing thrash metal. I could see this dude singing, you know, more of a darker power metal, like an Iced Earth sounding, you know, like Iced Earth sounding type of music. I could hear this guy he could join a European power metal band and sound great with them. He would sound great in something like Avantasia or something like, or even like something like Arion, where, They don't really play it's not all metal music. There's a lot of progressive stuff in it. I mean, the guy has a really versatile voice is really where I'm going with this. And I think he fits this. I mean, there's such a dark tone to his vocals with this music. And this music's not happy, folks. It's got a darker tone to it. It's just really, really good. So there's a song called A Pale Blood Sky. I'll put it in the show notes. That is the single so far that they have put out for this album. But let me just say this. That's not my favorite song in the album. It's good. But now that I've listened to the album, not my favorite song. I'd say if I ranked them 1 to 10, it probably would be number 5 or 4. But the record is good. It's a song called Dungeon Crawl, second track on the album. The single that they put out, of course, is the first track, but Dungeon Crawl second. That song is cool. There's a song called Eyes of the Deep. That's very, very good. Has a guest vocalist as well there. With Tommy from Amorphous. Now he adds to it, don't get me wrong, but the song itself is great. And then I'm looking at the track list. For Those Who Fell is another great track. But front to back, all the way through, there is not a bad song on this album. Folks, it is very rare that a band really knocks it out of the park on a debut album. It's just very, very uncommon for that to happen. People saw me post about the anniversary of the first Grip Inc. album, Power of Inner Strength. That's an example of knocking it out of the park with the debut album. A lot of Guns N' Roses fans will say that Appetite for Destruction is probably their best album. That's their debut album. I think the first Sonata Arctica album is probably their best one. But in general, most bands do not knock it out of the park on their first album. It just doesn't happen that often. Because typically what happens with me is I'll hear a debut album by a band. I'm like, this is solid. It's pretty good. I can't wait to hear how much better this band is going to get because there's a lot of potential here. And the album might be a 6 or a 7 out of 10 at most. This record, folks, this new Beholder album, In the Temple of the Tyrant, the band knocked it out of the park with this record. That is how good I think it is. Like instantly when I heard, after I ended up getting to the third or fourth song, I was like, these guys have it going on. Now I mentioned a few seconds ago, a couple minutes ago, that most debut albums probably give them a 6 or a 7 out of 10. Folks, this one gets a 9. This album is a 9 out of 10. That is how good it is. I do not say that lightly. Very rarely, especially in today's day and age, have I come on the show and said, man, there's a debut album by a band that's a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Because it rarely happens. This is a band to check out. This is a band to follow. And not only is this record very, very good, but if it's this good, what are these guys going to do in the second or third one? Like, how good is the second or third album going to be? Because if they're putting out stuff that sounds like this, most of the time with most bands out there, albums 2 and 3 are usually where you see the big improvement. It'll be interesting to see what this band does. Everybody on this record sounds great. The performances on the album sound great. John's vocals They're a lot different than Judicator, his other band. And I'm not saying Judicator's bad. I mean, I'm just not as much into newer power metal bands as I used to be. But this band, it's a little bit of a different story. And there's such a dark element to the music and his vocals. Great stuff. 9 out of 10, folks. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.